So we're already live.
Oh. I didn't know that. We're live from the moment I walked in the door.
Pretty much.
I think there should have been a disclosure statement to that fact.
Ryan and I just love to. I'm also putting it on Ryan. But to be, I don't know. I just love to dive right in and not be so polished.
Well, I guarantee you will not be getting polished. So you're in luck.
This is what I wanted. I personally have a lot of love and respect for you and your work.
Oh.
And we've been to a lot of events together.
Yes, a lot.
A lot of in different parts of the country, a lot of interesting, from Vermont to Disney World to
that is true.
A conference center in a city near you. Introduce yourself for those that don't know you.
Okay, I'm Kelly Scaggs. I'm the CEO of Fellowship Hall, Alcohol and Drug Treatment Center in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been around for 53 years. So we aren't quite as established as Cumberland Heights. You guys are 80 plus, right?
No. We're 58.
Oh, okay. Well, then we are right there with you.
You're right there, yeah.
A legacy program.
Yep.
And we have been a collaborator with Cumberland Heights for as long as I can remember. So we have I personally has a very soft spot in my heart, particularly for Cumberland Heights, because
we're very similar.
Very, very similar.
Sister
yes.
programs.
That's right. And
I just want to say one thing.
Yes.
One thing that is especially just from afar that I respect about you and where Fellowship Hall is. You are the first female CEO.
That is true.
Of Fellowship Hall.
Yes.
So
that is quite an honor to have had the opportunity to lead this wonderful organization and to be the first female in this position.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
thank you.
Very cool. What does a CEO of a treatment center do?
Oh gosh, I was hoping you knew. No, honestly, I don't think there is one set job description that you can say is a CEO's, because I think a lot of it depends on the organization and as to what that role looks like. How large the organization is. I mean, there are certainly treatment facilities that have multiple locations. Fellowship Hall just has one location, but it's a little bit of everything, honestly. I came up from a clinical side, and so somebody said to me once, which I thought was a really interesting perspective. They said, you no longer have just a caseload of people in treatment that you're responsible for. You have the whole organization. So essentially they become your caseload. And meaning that really their well-being is primary responsibility. Because the way I look at it is that the folks who are providing the services at my organization aren't being cared for, then they're not able to do what they need to for the folks that come to us for treatment. And so we call our patient population guest, and that was really intentional. Our founders wanted us to always keep top of mind that these individuals who come to us for help are coming of their own free will, because nobody's court mandated to be at our facility, and they're our guests and they need to be treated as such. So for me and as CEO of the organization, I need to remember that my primary responsibility is to care for the people who are caring for our guests. So that's the primary responsibility in my mind.
Yeah. And probably, if I make an assumption, it can be easy to get busy with the business of the day.
Absolutely.
Whether that's development or nursing or staffing or
all of those things,
yeah.
Or hurricanes that are coming to your area, coming to a treatment center near you.
Right.
So fortunately,
y'all were not affected by Helene.
We were not, but several providers
our other friend, Pavilion.
Yes. Yep. The entire western part of North Carolina was devastated by it. So, there are a lot of treatment providers in that part of the state. And so, as a leader of an organization, you literally never know what you're going to be dealing with. But you're right. It's important not to get distracted by the operational pieces and forget about the folks that are there. But you're right. We have, staffing issues to deal with. You have the financial part of running the organization. We're an organization that takes third-party insurance. So, you're dealing with that dance that goes on as well. Trying to get people access to care. It's just a multitude of responsibilities.
Do you, I'm leading the witness.
Okay.
Fellowship Hall identifies itself as a 12-step based program.
That is correct.
What does that mean to Fellowship Hall?
So for our organization, we were originally founded by 4 gentlemen who were members of 12-step recovery. And so it was very critical that become the foundation on which the organization is built and been maintained all these years. So for us, we recognize there are multiple paths to recovery. We realize that and have evolved over the years. I mean, it might be surprising to some people who aren't as connected in 12-step recovery to realize that, not that many decades ago, maybe not even decades for some, you couldn't be on traditional psychiatric meds and be in 12-step recovery. You can't be taking an antidepressant. So there's been a lot of evolution in our field. But for us at Fellowship Hall, we still have the core belief that people's lives are going to be most beneficial to them if they can be in a state of not being dependent on any type of mood or mind-altering medication in their recovery. That does not mean traditional psychiatric meds. It may even mean that people need other medication-supported treatment options to help them get to that point. Not everybody's going to be able to come in and get to a point in their recovery process without the assistance of other resources that are available to them. And we recognize that as an organization. So, people need medications to support them through their detox period. They may need medications to help support them in their early recovery process. We just want to see people find the life that they deserve and whatever means that may take to get them there. So that hopefully answers kind of the question. It's not, a hard line.
Right. That's very important.
Absolutely. And, Cumberland Heights has been, in my mind, a leader in that as well. And, we've had lots of conversations between our organizations about how do we stay true to our mission and our roots and still be sure that we are supporting people knowing what the latest research says, what the American Medical Association supports. How can we marry these two and make sure people are getting what they need to have the ultimate best outcome? And that's the goal.
I think best-in-class treatment are this is Nick's opinion, not the official opinion of Cumberland Heights Foundation, but I really do believe, based on my personal and professional experience, that best-in-class treatment in this country today are the legacy not-for-profit organizations who have invested in current practices but also celebrate their tradition.
Right.
I think that what I have observed is sometimes those things can be viewed as mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. And I think there's actually a beautiful synergy for programs like Fellowship Hall and Cumberland Heights when you do both.
Exactly.
Because likewise, and I know this about us, we have very similar mindsets of our values and principles and our missions that, we're going to help. Basically, treatment, I think, at both of our centers is focused on giving folks the resources they need to be successful post-treatment.
Exactly. That's
stabilize, introduce, identify a plan to reduce risk or odds of treatment failure, right?
Right.
And then support as best we can after they leave.
Absolutely. And I think for me, one of the cornerstones of a facility that's founded on the principles of the 12 steps, and I think it's been really highlighted in the last 5 years, is the fact that 12-step recovery provides people with connection in a group setting. And I think that's where the power is in the group. And we've lost a lot of that because of the pandemic. People got more separated, but I was so in awe watching what 12-step groups were able to do during the pandemic because they pivoted
Resilient.
It was amazing to see how quickly they pivoted and meetings went on Zoom or
without a hitch
onto virtual platforms. Yeah, without a hitch.
It makes me laugh because we were in. I'm sure we were in committee meetings and trying to figure it all out. And
we were meeting. Our leadership team was meeting daily during the pandemic, and we'd have these huddles, and we're like, "How can we start? Providing things virtually, and what can we do?" And the 12-step community, we're already having meetings around the world. People, I was like. This is incredible.
Yeah, it should be like a case study about the flexibility of that style of structure,
Exactly. The speed at which they did it, I'm still in awe. I still have questions about it, but it was amazing. Yeah. And folks were able to stay connected. But even that, and as a researcher, I'm sure that you would dive into this or maybe already have, the connection was there, but there was something different than being in person.
Yep.
And so it was amazing, and it still is, that people are utilizing that. And I think it's a great resource to take barriers away to treatment for folks. But there's something about in-person connection. And I think that's what's been so successful about these mutual self-aid groups that have been around for years is that connection. It's always said connection is protection, and it really is. And I think we learned that through the pandemic, that not having that human connection is so detrimental.
It's such a resource for organizations like these to have an arrow in their quiver that we are going to introduce you into recovery, and we are not going to apologize for that. Because I'll use myself as an example, unfortunately. 15 years of recovery, I feel like I have less figured out now than I did at a year of recovery. Something's weird about that. But it's really important to have a place to be genuine, authentic, and vulnerable. To share and be a part of, truly be a part of, they call it middle of the boat. Because whether you got 1 day, 1 year, 10 years, or whatever, it still is important to be able to learn just how to share and how to be a part of a community. Because it's in a lot of ways, it's easier with several years in recovery to hide.
Sure. Yeah, I think that the key to what you just said is the vulnerability piece. It's hard to be vulnerable. It's scary. And when we take guests, patients, people, and introduce them to a group where just the fact that you've walked through the door, you're accepted, you're a part of. That's all you had to do. You had to walk through the door. You don't have to talk. You don't have to share. Hopefully you get to that point that you will.
Right.
Allow yourself to be vulnerable. Just walking through that door obviously takes willingness to be a little bit vulnerable as well. But that's huge, to have a safe place to be vulnerable where you can say, I may have endangered my kids because of my disease. I've done these things that I'm not proud of, I'm ashamed of, or whatever on that spectrum that you're feeling about that you can say it and people are nodding along.
Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful.
It's powerful. And I wish everybody had that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really do. I think that is amazing. And people are scared and they, don't want to go to meetings for a variety of reasons. But I think if people can get connected in a group where they can have that experience, the healing and restorative properties of that are almost indescribable.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Of course. I may not answer it, but you can always ask.
Yes, good. It's a good clinician, and a good human with boundaries. Are you in recovery?
No, I am not a person in long-term recovery, but I do attend Al-Anon and choose to live my life by the principles of the 12 steps. And that has been life-changing for me.
Yeah, I knew that about you. So, because we've talked about this. As a CEO, as a leader with multiple caseloads, can you talk for those that want to get to know you more, want to understand more about how to lead programs that are based in 12-step principles? What are the strengths, because there are some, and maybe challenges being somebody with your experience leading a program that's based in 12-step culture?
That is a great question. And I'll tell you, there have been moments of self-doubt in my journey where I've thought, do I have a right to be in this spot? Not having the lived experience of a person who's experienced firsthand what substance use disorder does to an individual. And then being able to pull back and look at what substance use disorder does to people's lives, if you've grown up around it, if you love people with this disease, and realizing, I don't necessarily have to have walked the path of the alcoholic or addict to understand the challenges. Much in the same way, and I know it's cliche, people say it all the time, you don't need a heart surgeon who also has heart disease. You want someone who knows about heart disease. And there's some comfort in, kind of self-soothing, going, I just have to know about it. But I think for me, what's been really critical from the first day I came to Fellowship Hall, and I came to the organization as a family counselor, and then became the clinical director, and then served as interim CEO and now as CEO of the organization. I think it's, again, back to vulnerability, being willing to say, hey, I haven't experienced that. Can you tell me about that? Or, hey, Nick, what was your journey like to get where you are now? And being willing to listen and be vulnerable and say, here's what I don't know. Or even sitting with a guest, a patient, a client, whatever your organization calls them, and say, tell me about your experience. Because if you're going to help someone, that's what you need them to do, because you're not going to have experienced everything that somebody who walks into your office has experienced. So I think the vulnerability and being able to say that and to always be open to learning, and recognizing that my experience isn't your experience, but that doesn't mean that you can't lead an organization. You can't lead a department. You can't, even choose how you're going to navigate through your own personal experiences. I feel like having the ability to stay flexible and open are really keys to being able to lead.
It strikes me about what you just said is all the strength that comes from your experience. Because there's a lot of humility in that, kind of natural checks and balances. I had a professor a long time ago who wasn't in recovery. He's still a professor at Texas Tech. His name's Tom Kimball. And I remember being about 1 or 2 years clean, going back to school, and being really self-righteous about recovery, just because I was excited.
Yeah.
And when you discover something that works, you get excited about it.
You want everybody to know.
Right, exactly. Somebody on my Southwest flight, check out the recovery literature. Maybe some oversharing happened in my experience, but I'll never forget learning from him how valuable it is to have a diversity of experiences with this work, right? And if we want to make an impact, it really takes everybody. And I think about our own staff at Cumberland Heights, and oftentimes when a new staff member joins my team and isn't in recovery, we tend to eventually have a conversation about this dynamic.
Right.
And I'm always very quick to say, no, we need you. Really. We have a lot of people in recovery here, and we need to make sure that we have a real wealth of different experiences and mindsets and skills, because it takes all of us.
It really does. And, that those different experiences and learning from one another and being able to talk about it and laugh about it.
Right.
And, because being able to find humor in some of it. I mean, there's obviously, it isn't funny things that bring people to those experiences. But as a staff, to be able to kind of compare, because when I first came to Fellowship Hall, on the clinical team at that time, I was the only person who wasn't in personal long-term recovery. And so it was...
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And now that's been almost 20 years.
Right.
So to be fair, that's not the case now. But it was, for me, almost like getting all these brothers and sisters that I didn't have growing up. I have one brother whom I'm close to, but I mean, it was like having all these siblings because they would kind of rib me about, oh, you probably never went to jail, or you probably never, like, it would be these, all these
professional war stories in some ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they were open to hearing kind of what my experiences have been, and then I was open to theirs, and it was just some of the most fertile ground for learning.
That's a great word.
And I still look back so fondly on, we would all eat lunch together, and on those times of how much I learned from them. And I didn't come as a new clinician. I already been a clinician for 15 years at that point. So it was fun to learn from them. And they were some of the best teachers ever because of their willingness to be vulnerable. And it keeps going back to that in my mind. It's just the willingness to be vulnerable and to be open that, your experience isn't everyone's experience. Even in the rooms, I mean, if you're honest, right? Everybody in the rooms is coming from a different perspective. Their journey to find their seat isn't going to be the same. I mean, if you walk into any 12-step meeting, everybody hasn't had the experience of interacting with the legal system.
Right.
Some people never have that experience.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is some people have, like, I don't have a lot of the experience. Like you said, we don't have all the same experiences. And sometimes, like I got clean and sober when I was 20 years old.
Right.
I don't even think about it anymore, but I've never had a legal drink. And so there were early days that I was genuinely like, was I bad enough to be here?
Right.
And that was probably like an interesting rationalization of like, did I really have an issue? You know what I mean?
Right.
I almost went to prison for 10 years. So like, check. But like,
maybe.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't show up to inpatient residential treatment on accident. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Some people still think they did.
Yeah, of course. But I like the word fertile that you used because you're absolutely right. The experience of being able to learn, that push-pull.
Right.
That push-pull, that ribbing that you talked about. That's why I think, if you're a clinician or you're interested in this work, like we just had a staff alumni event.
Those are the best.
Yeah, we call it homecoming. And in particular, it's they could have gone to treatment at Cumberland Heights, but they had to have worked for us at some point. So we bring all these staff back, and it's really a night of laughing and crying and hugging and celebrating because it's basically an open mic.
Yeah.
People go up and tell stories. And one of the things I told Jay afterwards that was so interesting is there's been multiple generations of people that have worked in our organization and surely yours, and having our current staff celebrate with people who used to work there and all of the riffraff that has taken place at Cumberland Heights. I mean that in the best way possible, like people telling stories about breaking into the kitchen during, a snowstorm and like making a sandwich and, like Cumberland Heights and Fellowship Hall not only are okay because of those experiences, they're thriving.
Well, it's that shared history you have with all those folks.
Yeah.
And that's really the fabric of the organization and the stories. Yeah. Think about a family. I mean, you get together at the holidays, healthy
That's
families.
Exactly
and they tell stories and they laugh around the table and, oh, do you remember the time this? And to me, that's what those events are all about. And we're the same way. Or you have the organizational lore, so to speak, Oh, well, you probably weren't here the time that 3 guests drove a car into the pond out back. What? And then and you talk about those things. Oh yeah, or they're just they become the.
Next time you're with Jay, one of the stories that we learned is that ask Jay. I don't mind. Cumberland Heights once, a long time ago, grew a marijuana plant. So
I'm going to assume it was accidentally.
It was accidental, but that was what I had not heard before. So
that's great.
We appreciate you so much.
Likewise.
I know many of our staff, there's just this exchange of knowledge or contact or sometimes just sharing.
Yes.
Hey, can we talk? I need to unload something.
Perhaps commiserating at times.
Commiserating. But we are such big supporters of Fellowship Hall and your work in Greensboro. And I would just encourage anybody that wants to learn more about who y'all are and what you stand for to check them out.
Thank you.
And I told you this. I have not been yet, but I will.
I know. You keep threatening.
I know.
The doors are open. The invitation is.
I went to McKay's.
Oh my gosh, you were too close. You should have come by.
Because I was with family, and McKay's is a store in Tennessee, and there's also one in Greensboro. I will say that McKay's in Greensboro,
bookstore for those who don't know,
is incredible. It's massive.
That one's brand new. They probably told you.
Yeah. But it was super impressive. But anyways, thank you for doing this. I know you're busy.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It was my pleasure. Always happy to support Cumberland Heights.
Yeah.
We admire you guys.
We're going to have Kelly's contact information in this episode. If you want to reach out to her, I'm sure you can. And just be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you guys for listening. See you again next time.